On a cold winter night in 1916, Prince Felix Yusupov nervously prepared to receive his dinner guest. If everything went as planned, the man would be dead before morning. The Russian monarchy was on the brink of total collapse, and to Yusupov and the circle of aristocrats behind him, this one guest, a filthy, wild-eyed peasant with no title, no military rank, and no formal education, was the single cause of it all. But how could one man, a wandering monk from the frozen edge of Siberia, bring an entire empire to its knees? His name was Grigori Rasputin, and to understand how he did it, you have to go back to the very beginning. He was born in 1869 in Pokrovskoye, a remote farming village on the Siberian steppe, so far from civilization that it barely registered on any map. His family lived modestly, and young Grigori showed little interest in the quiet life that surrounded him. He drank heavily, stole horses, and carried on with women in ways that scandalized even a remote Siberian village. He was so debauched that people stopped using his given name and called him by the word that best described him. Rasputin, in Russian, means the debauched one. His surname was an insult before it became a legend. Then, in his late 20s, something shifted. Inspired by the wandering monks he had encountered on the roads of rural Russia, men who drifted endlessly from holy site to holy site, carrying nothing but faith, Rasputin abandoned his wife and children and set out on a pilgrimage of his own. He walked hundreds of miles to the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkhoturya, where a mystic elder named Makary recognized something in him and taught him to read and write. He gave up drinking and meat and emerged a transformed figure. Whether genuinely or calculatedly, it was remarkably effective. He spent the next several years wandering Russia as a Stranik, a holy wanderer, preaching, healing, and building a reputation that preceded him everywhere. Strangers were captivated by his magnetic presence, and his eyes, deep-set and unnervingly direct, made people feel simultaneously seen and destabilized. Some believed he had genuine gifts of prophecy and healing. Powerful clergymen sought him out. His fame spread far beyond Siberia. By 1903, that reputation had grown large enough to pull him toward St. Petersburg, where reputation could be converted into real power. He arrived with nothing. Within 2 years, he had been introduced to the Tsar and Tsarina of all Russia. His entry into the Romanov inner circle came through the most desperate door imaginable. The Tsarevich Alexei, heir to the throne, had been born with hemophilia. Even a minor fall could trigger internal bleeding severe enough to be fatal, and the doctors surrounding the family were powerless. The Tsarina Alexandra, a deeply religious woman of German birth who had never found her footing among the scheming nobles of the Russian court, was consumed by her son's illness. She had tried everything medicine could offer. Nothing worked. When Rasputin was brought to Alexei's bedside during a severe crisis in 1912, he urged the family to reject the doctor's treatment. Alexei recovered. What medical historians now understand is that the royal physicians had been prescribing aspirin, a drug that actively worsens hemophilia by preventing blood from clotting. Simply removing that treatment may well have been what saved the boy's life. For Alexandra, no medical explanation was necessary. This man had been sent by God to protect her son. Nothing anyone said would change her mind. Following the 1912 episode, Rasputin made a direct prophecy. If he were ever killed or abandoned, both their son and their crown would be lost. They believed him completely, and that belief became the chain that bound the fate of the entire Romanov dynasty to a Siberian peasant with a criminal past. Outside the palace, opinion was sharply divided. Among the peasantry, Rasputin was one of their own, a common man who had found his way into the highest chambers of power and carried their voice with him. Among the nobility and the orthodox clergy, he was despised. They were skeptical of his healing claims, appalled by his behavior, and convinced he was corrupting the royal family from within. Both groups watched the same man. Neither agreed on what he was. What followed inside the palace was a slow and deeply damaging infiltration of Russian government itself. In a court built on rigid rituals of rank and deference, Rasputin was deliberately raw. speaking plainly, making eye contact regardless of anyone's station. To Alexandra, who had always felt like an outsider among the French-speaking aristocracy, this felt not like crudeness but like honesty. While everyone else maneuvered for position, Rasputin seemed to want nothing except to serve God and protect her child, a perception he cultivated with great care. By 1915, when Tsar Nicholas left Petrograd to personally command the Russian army at the front, the center of domestic power shifted dramatically. The Tsarina was left in effective control of the government, and Rasputin was firmly at her side. What followed became known among Russia's political class as ministerial leapfrog. Ministers were dismissed in rapid succession, not on competence but on Rasputin's approval. Men like Boris Sturma were installed as prime minister, widely regarded as incompetent but skilled at cultivating the right relationship with the right peasant. The Tsarina relayed his recommendations to the Tsar as divine instruction. In one letter, passing along his guidance on where to advance troops near Riga, explaining the direction had come to him in a dream. The Tsar, exhausted at the front, frequently complied. Meanwhile, Russia was disintegrating. Over 3 million soldiers had died. Bread riots erupted in the cities, and the stories swirling around Rasputin, his drunken behavior, his affairs, his grip on the Tsarina, were feeding a national narrative that the empire was being run by a depraved mystic. Some were true, some were wildly exaggerated. But the line between the man and the myth had dissolved, and Rasputin had become the living symbol of a rotten regime. By late 1916, Yusupov and a group of conservative nobles had concluded that assassination was the only remaining way to save the monarchy. On the night of December 30th, Rasputin was lured to the Yusupov palace under the pretense of a private dinner. One of the co-conspirators had originally agreed to supply the food and wine with cyanide, but at the last moment had a crisis of conscience and substituted the poison with a harmless powder instead. Rasputin ate the cakes and drank the wine without any ill effect. In desperation, Yusupov produced a pistol and shot him at close range. According to Yusupov's memoir, Rasputin collapsed, then got back up, grabbed him by the throat, and staggered into the courtyard before being shot again, beaten, bound, and thrown into the freezing Neva River. The forensic record tells a less dramatic story. The autopsy found 3 gunshot wounds, including a fatal shot to the forehead at close range. No cyanide, no water in the lungs. He had almost certainly been dead before his body reached the river. The legend of his near-supernatural resilience was, at least in part, a story the killers constructed, perhaps to justify what they had done, or because they needed to believe it had been difficult. What they could not have anticipated was how catastrophically it would backfire. The assassination enraged the peasantry who had seen Rasputin as one of their own, and shattered what remained of the ruling class's unity. With the scapegoat gone, the people's fury found its true target. Less than 2 months later, revolution erupted. Nicholas abdicated in early 1917. 19 months after that, the Tsar, the Tsarina, and all 5 of their children were executed by Bolshevik forces in a basement in Yekaterinburg. Before his murder, Rasputin had written a letter to Nicholas II warning plainly. If killed by nobles, none of the imperial family would survive for more than 2 years. Whether genuine prophecy, self-protection, or later fabrication, historians still debate it. What cannot be debated is that every word came true. He walked out of Siberia with nothing, no education, no title, no connections, and ended up holding the levers of the largest empire on earth. Whether he was a genuine holy man, a calculating manipulator, or simply a clever opportunist who found the one crack in a dynasty already collapsing, the world has been arguing about this for over a century, and perhaps that, more than anything else, is the most Rasputin thing of all.